is Taima Ali, and this is the World's Wardrobe Malfunction, the podcast that unfolds fashion issues. In today's podcast, I'll be talking about the rise of fast fashion and its effects on the fashion market. I thought a bit of context might help you prepare for the heavy content that's yet to come. Fast fashion gathered pace from the end of the 1990s when brands began to work for new ways to increase profits. Globalization had grown rapidly in the 80s and 90s, paving the way for value and mid-price brands to shift the bulk of their production to the developing world, where labor and overhead costs are a fraction of those in Europe. High street brands were coming under increasing pressure from supermarket chains, developing their own lines of low-cost clothing. Initially, they sold items like simple t-shirts and underwear. But this movement signaled a new era for supermarket clothing and a move into high fashion and low-cost items. Traditionally, most fashion labels have produced two main collections a year: spring, summer, and autumn-winter. However, high street brands needed to create some interest within their stores mid-season, so the number of collections increased to drive sales. A new fashion companies re-examined their supply chains and developed a system which several other brands then followed. They segmented their supply chain, keeping basic items manufactured in the Far East, but brought the production of the more high-fashion items closer to home. This had several benefits. Firstly, it decreased their financial outlay on forward orders and also allowed them to make decisions about the fashion items much later in the season. This added flexibility and ensured that they were able to react to the market quickly and deliver on-trend items within their stores. This model could then be developed through the use of new technological systems, which linked all parts of the supply chain together. This new system allowed the development of just-in-time manufacturing and has now developed to a stage where they are able to turn a garment around from sketch to shop floor as quick as 2 weeks. Consumers reacted positively to this trend, which in turn has resulted in the widespread speeding up of fashion. My name is Taima Ali, and this is the World's Wardrobe Malfunction, the podcast that unfolds fashion issues. In this podcast, I will be talking about the early effects that the rise of fast fashion had on factory workers. As mentioned in the previous podcast, consumers reacted positively to this trend, which in turn has resulted in the widespread speeding up of fashion during the late 1990s. Factory workers felt the effect of this. A Sri Lankan factory owner interviewed by Oxfam demonstrated the pressure they went through by saying, open quote, "Last year, the deadlines were about 90 days. This year, the deadlines for delivery are about 60 days, sometimes even 45. They have drastically come down. Instead of 40,000 garments being manufactured across 4 styles for 20 weeks at rate of 500 per styles per week, all that is firm is the first 5 weeks across 4 styles at 500 per style per week. This is a commitment to 10,000 garments. The remaining 30,000 is unknown, nor is there any promises of how many styles and at what manufacturing rate per week." Just Style 2006 Purchasing Trends in the Fashion Industry. The Clean Clothes campaign described similar instances with garment workers in China. Open quote, "We have endless overtime in the peak season and we sit working non-stop for 13 to 14 hours a day. It's like this every day. We saw and saw, without a break until our arms feel more sore and stiff." The increase in the amount of clothes people consume also has consequences for the environment. More clothing is shipped and flown from the Far East to Europe than ever before, and the life cycle of these garments is decreasing. Statistics show that on average, UK consumers send 30 kilograms of clothing and textiles per capita to landfill each year, and that 1.2 million tons of clothing went to landfill in 2005, and that is just in the UK. Textiles also present particular problems in landfill, and as synthetic or man-made fibers products will not decompose, while woolen garments do decompose and produce methane, which contributes to global warming. As Textile consultant Kate Fletcher points out fast isn't free. Someone somewhere is paying. It's also clear that the environment is suffering too. My name is Taima Ali, and this is the World's Wardrobe Malfunction, the podcast that unfolds fashion issues. In today's podcast, I decided to talk about a relevant example, a brand that I bet you, if you're hearing this podcast, is featured in your own closet. If I search hashtag Zara on my Instagram, I can see well over 22 million posts of people wearing clothing that was bought from the retailer, everywhere from Jordan to New York. In the UK, Zara has been a high street fixture since 1998 and has a growing number of stores. Millions of us have brought the brand into our homes, and so millions of us should be shocked and angered by the reports that the factory workers in Istanbul have been hiding notes in the clothes that they have been producing for one of Zara's suppliers, pleading for help. One note apparently said, "I made this item you're going to buy, but I didn't get paid for it." The workers were reportedly left unpaid after their factory shut down overnight. Inditex, Zara's parent company, has since promised to reimburse the subcontractors' workers as soon as possible. But the rise in rampant consumerism remains a worry. The value of the UK fashion industry has jumped to 26 billion, up from 21 billion in 2009. And fashion bucks broader growth trends. To put it simply, our appetite for new shoes and accessories is growing more quickly than our appetite for food. We know that our love of fast fashion is terrible for the environment. It was estimated that this spring Britons would spend 235 million pieces of clothing to landfill. Consumer debt levels are reaching an all-time high, and as retailers such as ASOS are starting to offer credit options to their young customers, it's scarily easy to spend money we don't have on clothes we don't need. I wonder whether our failure to address the fast fashion problem is because it affects more women than men at every level, even though research conducted earlier this year found that British men typically spend more on their clothes than women. Fashion and clothes are routinely dismissed as trivial feminine interests. Women are exploited and mocked, disproportionately targeted by advertisers, and then accused of being foolish for spending their hard-earned money on a shopping trip. That's just the consumer end. More seriously, it's estimated that of the estimated 60 to 75 million garment workers who are employed to make our clothes, 80% of them are women, working in dangerous conditions and not being paid a living wage. If they're being paid at all, globally poverty affects women first. More than 70% of the world's poorest people are women. More on this issue will be covered in the following podcast. Stay tuned. My name is Taima Ali, and this is the World's Wardrobe Malfunction, the podcast that unfolds fashion issues. In today's podcast, I'll be addressing the big elephant in the room that many people choose to dismiss and ignore, and that is why fast fashion is a bad thing, and how it affects our lives, other people, and the environment. First of all, fast fashion is expensive for you and our planet. Fast fashion is designed to be replaced quickly, not so much by desire but by need. Clothing literally falls apart, ending up in landfills rather than making it to shops even if you donate. In the US, only 10% of donated clothes get resold. The rest floods in landfills. We send 13 million tons of our clothes to landfills in the US alone, where they sit for 200 years, leaving toxic chemicals and dyes to contaminate local soil and groundwater. Our slow fashion community has found that investing in fewer higher quality clothes actually saves us money because each piece lasts longer. Second of all, fast fashion disempowers women. With fast fashion, you trap a generation of young women into poverty. 75 million people are making our clothes today. 80% is made by women who are only 18 to 24 years old. It takes a garment worker 18 months to earn what a fashion brand CEO makes on their lunch break. A majority of them earn less than $3 per day. The biggest concerns fast fashion cuts are human. Cheap clothes are made by underage workers entering the industry as young as 14 to work long hard hours, an average of 14 hours per day in sweatshops, for low wages while dealing with sexual harassment. Third of all, fast fashion is a disaster for our planet. The largely unregulated burn of fast fashion is putting too much pressure on our planet. 12.8 million tons of clothing are sent to landfills in the US every year. This is a football field filled 14 feet deep with clothes. The fashion industry's CO2 emissions are projected to increase by more than 60% to nearly 2.8 billion tons per year by 2030. Main cotton-producing countries like China and India are already facing water shortages, and with water consumption projected to go up by 50% by 2030, these cotton-growing nations face the dilemma of choosing between cotton production and secure and clean drinking water. My name is Taima Ali, and this is The World's Wardrobe Malfunction, the podcast that unfolds fashion issues. In today's podcast, I'll be introducing the concept of sustainable fashion, or as some might refer to as eco-fashion, the contemporary solution to the exponentially growing fast fashion industry. Sustainable fashion, also called eco-fashion, is a part of the growing design philosophy and trend of sustainability, the goal of which is to create a system which can be supported indefinitely in terms of human impact on the environment and social responsibility. It can be seen as an alternative trend against fast fashion. Sustainable fashion came into the public eye in the late 1980s and the early 1990s, as well-known companies such as Patagonia and Esprit brought sustainability into their business. The owners of those companies at the time, Yvon Chouinard, hopefully that's how it's supposed to be pronounced, and Dong Tompkins, were outdoorsmen and witnessed the environment being degraded by increased use. They considered research into the impact of fibers used in their companies. For Patagonia, this resulted in life cycle assessment to 4 fibers: cotton, wool, nylon, and polyester. For Esprit, the focus was on cotton, which represented 90% of their business at the time. The work of these companies influenced a whole movement in fashion and sustainability. They co-founded the first organic cotton conference held in 1991 in California. Esprit Eco Collection, developed by the head designer Linda Gross, was launched at retail in 1992 and was based on the Eco Guide published by Elmwood Institute. It comprised organic cotton, recycled wool, naturally processed wool, low-impact dyes, naturally colored cotton, and non-electroplated hardware. Patagonia made a commitment to recycled polyester in 1992 and a company-wide commitment to organic cotton in 1996. Both communicated their action for sustainability through point-of-sale materials, catalogs, and PR. Both supported the work of the Sustainable Cotton Project, which ran from tours for fashion industry professionals to meet directly with farmers growing organic and IPM cotton in California. Both companies contributed to the US NOSB standards to include organic fiber as well as food. Throughout the 1990s and early 2000s, the movement in sustainable fashion broadened to include many brands, though the primary focus has remained on improving the impact of products through fiber and fabric processing and material provenance. Tompkins and Chouinard were early to note the fundamental cause of unsustainability, and that is the exponential growth and consumption. Esprit placed an ad in Youthny Reader in 1990, making a plea for responsible consumption. Patagonia has since made headlines with its "Don't Buy This Jacket" ad in the New York Times. It's worthy to know that with the average American throwing away nearly 70 pounds of clothing per year, the fashion industry has become the second largest cause of pollution worldwide. My name is Taima Ali, and this is The World's Wardrobe Malfunction, the podcast that unfolds fashion issues. In today's podcast, I'll be discussing slow fashion, the alternative to fast fashion, and part of what has been called the slow movement. Slow fashion advocates for principles similar to the principles of slow food, which are good, quality, flavorsome, and healthy food, clean production that does not harm the environment, fair, accessible prices for consumers, and fair conditions and pay for producers. The expression slow fashion was coined in a 2007 article by Kate Fletcher published in The Ecologist, where she compared the eco-sustainable ethical fashion industry to the slow food movement. The concept of slow fashion borrows heavily from the slow food movement, founded by Carlo Petrini in Italy in 1986. Slow food links pleasure and food with awareness and responsibility. It defends biodiversity in our food supply by opposing the standardization of taste, defends the need for consumer information, and protects cultural identities tied to food. It has spawned a wealth of other slow movements. Slow cities, for example, designed with slow values but within the context of a town or a city and a commitment to improve its citizens' quality of life. Some elements of the slow fashion philosophy include buying vintage clothes, redesigning old clothes, shopping from smaller producers, making clothes and accessories at home, and buying garments that last longer. New ideas and product innovations are constantly redefining slow fashion, so using a static, single definition would ignore the evolving nature of the concept. Unlike fast fashion, slow fashion production ensures quality manufacturing to lengthen the life of the garment. Slow fashion may be considered a revolt or action against the fast fashion movement. Developing a garment with a cultural and emotional connection is also important to the purpose behind slow fashion. Consumers will keep an article of clothing longer than one season if they feel emotionally or culturally connected to the article of clothing. A taxation is in early stages of development in order to deter fashion companies from purchasing or producing materials that are not made with recycled, organic, or repurposed materials. Utilizing materials already made will reduce the industry's carbon footprint. There is also an important movement towards companies being more transparent. The need for companies to show their manufacturing process boosts the company's reputation and can aid buyers to making more conscious decisions. In accordance with the slow movement, there is a trend towards more conscious buying, as well as companies attracting new consumers with their eco-friendly process. Consumers still need to do their research into companies, and some of them use the idea of eco-fashion without fully backing it up. Although price is sometimes a deterrent for purchasing slow fashion items, in the long run, one piece of well-designed and well-produced clothing will outlive 5 cheap pieces of clothing. Generally, the more a person spends on their clothes, the more value the items will hold. It makes the piece more special and therefore will make the person feel better about the way they wear. Slow fashion clothing is made up of high-quality materials, usually with timeless designs that can be worn year-round and never go out of style. Slow fashion garments should also consider their end-of-life cycle. Generally, if it is well made and with natural fibers, it can be broken down easier as opposed to the fast fashion industry, where the amount of waste generated goes directly to landfills. My name is Taima Ali, and this is The World's Wardrobe Malfunction, the podcast that unfolds fashion issues. This final podcast is going to be light and hopefully encouraging. Today, I'll be talking about what you can do to make a change. My intelligent listener, I encourage you to buy things made of sustainable fibers such as bamboo, hemp, organic cotton, wool, and silk. Buying clothes made from these materials is a great alternative to partaking in what is offered through fast fashion. These clothes will have longer lifetime and are something you can feel good about wearing. Say no to sweatshops. Take a look at your tag. If it says it was made in a developing country, chances are it is the product of a sweatshop labor. One way you can be sure you are buying sweat-free clothing is if the label says it was made in a union or is a fair trade company. You can also be certain that you're getting sweatshop-free clothes from retailers who commit to not using them, such as American Apparel and No Sweat. If you're still uncertain, you can always search the internet for the name of the company the clothing is from. Sell your clothes for money on eBay, for example, or donate. Donating your old or unwanted clothing is a great way to help people and give other people in need. It also can reduce textile waste, and you can feel confident that your clothes aren't sitting in a landfill. How to donate? Gather up all of your unwanted garments, wash and then secure them in a trash bag. Bring them to your donation center of choice. These could include the Salvation Army, Goodwill, a clothing drop-off box, or any thrift store or charity near you. Making smart choices and being aware is very essential. You have the strength to change this. And as I said, this is the final podcast. So I hope that this series opened your eyes to a serious issue we are facing today and educated you on how to make a change. Thank you for tuning in.